If you guys need any cards, packs, sleeves, anything of that nature, shop on TCG Player using my affiliate link in the description. What's good, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 best effect monsters in Edison format. Of course, we are referring here to orange cards only, so no Brionic, no Black Rose. They're out of the running. They're kind of the only ones in the running, actually, in terms of extra deck monsters, because Edison format still occupies this weird period where extra deck toolbox exists, but it's not like completely completely over the top in the way that it is developed since then. But yeah, let's just get into it. First off on the list, we have at number 10 Ryko Lightsworn Hunter. Now I know what you're thinking. Ryko, yeah, it's a solid card. Is it really top 10 best? And I have to say, yes, I think it is. Just like think about how integral and like iconic Ryko is to so many different strategies in Edison format. I mean, there are so many decks that play like the just hamster plus Ryko plus Charge of the Light Brigade. It's like a large engine in so many decks. It's just such like a step up in terms of flip monsters compared to the DM era, in that it just like pops a card and then mills. So it's just like a straight 1-for-1 at worst, and then like can go +1 if you just flip it up and kill something, and then can go even more than +1 if you happen to mill something of value, which there's a lot of pretty good cards that you could be milling in Edison format. So it's just like this crazy removal sort of engine that exists in a ton of decks in the format. And I think the prevalence of Ryko over the years, just in, like I said, so many decks play this card. The prevalence really makes it such that I think it has to occupy a spot on the list. Plus, there's this whole like engine surrounding it with Hamster and with Charge of the Light Brigade, which are also good in a lot of decks. And like none of that would be a thing without Ryko specifically. So he's really the centerpiece of all of that, which is why I have him on the list. I feel like he needs to occupy a spot here. So we're giving him number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Trigodia. I know we joke a lot on the channel about how much I'm in love with Trigodia, and like this card is just, I'm obsessed with it. But actually, I need to level with everyone. I need to be serious. I'm like 100% not trolling with my Trag support. I think this card is one of the best monsters in the entire format. I think it is better than Gores. Let me get it out of the way and just say Gores isn't even on this list. I think that good players basically never lose to Gores, unless they just were in some like situation where they had no choice but to not play around it. But like Trag, you cannot really play around Trag. Granted, it's not like the crazy swing in terms of damage on board that Gores is, at least not often. But Trag can get really big too. It can just be like 30, 36, and then it's like this huge unoutable thing. But really, the reason Trag is crazy is because of the fact that it's so much easier to drop. You basically just can't play around Trag. Like your opponent can just ram their stuff if they really want to drop the Trag, and then like you can synchro with Trag. But the craziest thing about Trag by far is that it just has a snatch steal. Like you can just pitch a level 8 monster and steal their Stardust or their Absolute Zero, or you can pitch a level 4 and just steal their normal summon, and they just never get it back. Like it's just yours now. Like your monster, my monster. And that is totally nuts. So I'd say like the ease of summoning combined with the snatch steal does make it better than Gores for me. Obviously, Gores puts more damage on board generally, and Gores can be more game-winning in certain points, but I think overall Trigodia is actually, unironically, the better card, which is why I have it here at number 9. Number 8, we have an interesting choice that a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought of, which is Deepsea Diva. Now, I'm going to talk about Stratos later on this list, spoiler alert, but Deepsea Diva is actually kind of the first, or maybe not the very first, but at least the first relevant that I can think of version of like an even crazier type of card than Stratos, where it's like Stratos, the thing with it is it's a turn 1 +1, but Deepsea Diva is like a tour guide, basically. It's like a turn 1 +1 that specials a monster from the deck, and that is just completely on a whole other level of insane. Now, I do think that Diva's lower than Stratos just because like there's like 2 good Diva targets and they're complete bricks, whereas Stratos has a whole archetype of heroes that you can search. So maybe like in a vacuum, Diva is better, but in Edison, I think Stratos is a better card. That being said, Diva is insane and is integral to like multiple different strategies in Edison format. I mean, all the hero decks basically play Diva at this point. Even the one where Diva isn't even that great and it's just like normal summoning an Android. Even that deck plays Diva just because it's like the best water I guess you can generically play. And then of course Diva Hero plays it, and it's insane in there. And then the zombie deck plays it, and it's absolutely crazy in zombies. If like you run over the recruiter and they have Goblin and they just summon Diva, you basically lose the game at that point. So it's one of the like craziest starters, craziest like combo cards out there, craziest pluses. It's just sort of it would be higher obviously if it weren't just kind of underdeveloped in terms of what you can actually get off the Diva, but what Diva does is just so nuts, so I think it had to be included on the list here. Here at number 7, we have the first boss monster on the list, which is Archlord Christia. I'm pretty sure we all know what this card does if we play Edison format, but I've talked at length about Archlord Christia. It's kind of one of these cards, I mentioned this a lot, where they just gave it too many effects, you know? Like, this thing, first of all, you can normal summon it, which is nuts. It's like, you can just also normal summon this card. It's not even, like, must first be special. No, you can just normal summon it. Also, it just drops itself when you have 4. And then when it drops itself, it gets you a Yep +1 for no reason at all. So, like, even if your Christia gets bottomless, or even if it gets deprisoned, or whatever, it just still traded +1 into their back row without even having to commit your normal summon. So it's just like never bad to drop Christia. Like the worst thing that can happen is they judgment it, I guess. But Christia's just nuts. And then like, oh, also it has this floodgate effect that says your opponent can't play the game. Well, technically it says both players can't play the game, but one of those players controls a Christia, so you know, pretty substantial advantage goes to them on top of the +1 that they just got for no reason at all. And then, like, on top of all of that, it annoyingly, like, loops itself, which makes it even more obnoxious to out, because if you have, like, a torrential or a mirror, then it might just go back to the top and they can resummon it and get another +1. Christia is just so nuts. Christia is just so nuts, and then on top of that, it's a light fairy, so you can use it with Herald and Honest. So being one of the just, like, absolutely most overpowered boss monsters in the entire format definitely earns it a spot on this list. Number 6, Plague Spreader Zombie. Some of you might think that's a little odd to put Plague Spreader this high, like above all of the other stuff. But actually, Plague is kind of, if you think about it, just the undisputed number 1 best tuner monster in the entire format. It's completely generic, unlike Debris and Quick Draw and stuff like that. And like, it just specials itself from Grave. Like, it's the only one that does that, and this sort of unique quality just makes it the best tuner to play in, like, so many decks. Like, any kind of mill deck, Vayu Turbo, Light Sworn, you gotta play it. Of course, you play it in Zombies, and then, like, just any deck that plays Armageddon or Greffer or, like, any of that dark stuff can, of course, incorporate this card, because it is a dark monster, and being a dark monster is just so insane, and being a dark monster with a graveyard effect is even more insane. So I think Plague is just nuts. I think is probably the most ubiquitous tuner in the entire format, and definitely easy to see why, of course, just like being able to synchro with it and then revive itself and synchro again is really crazy when you think about it in the context of Edison format. So I think Plague definitely deserved to be on this list somewhere. I'm actually putting it above Diva. Like I mentioned, maybe later on Diva becomes crazier than Plague, definitely, but Plague is certainly a card that I think in Edison format probably deserves to be higher. I mentioned earlier we'd be talking about this card. Number 5, we have Stratos. So I talked about, of course, how Diva is like the first tour guide type of monster, but Stratos is the first Stratos, okay? And there's a reason that we refer to them as Stratos, because Stratos is the guy. He's the OG. He's like probably the very first. Well, I guess gadgets exist, but they're not on the level of Stratos, of course, where it's just like you summon it and you get a plus. Like, you can just summon it turn 1, get a plus. No reason, no thinking. You just get a plus. It's just an easy, free, absolutely like nonsense +1 when you summon this card. I mean, the entire hero strategies that exist in Edison format that are extremely prevalent as like some of the most powerful decks out there, all of them rely heavily on the existence of Stratos. It's like a searchable starter for them because of eCall and Rhoda being able to grab this. So Stratos is just so crazy. 1800 stat line as well for like a level 4 normal summon is quite good. Obviously, you would prefer 19, but I mean, you can't have literally everything you want in one card. Yeah, but Stratos is just crazy. Sort of the first of its kind, really. Obviously, as the game goes on and became more modernized, I think tons of archetypes and decks got cards like this. But you have to realize that back then, stuff like this was really rare. Just like summon it, search, get a +1 like that. That did not come around too often in 2007 when Stratos came out. So Stratos is just absolutely nuts. It has another effect too. Like that's the thing. This thing just has another effect that pops back row, and it comes up quite often as well. So Stratos is just completely over the top, crazy card. Definitely deserves to be here at number 5. Number 4, we have here Substitute. Now, I had to put something from the Frog deck on this list, I think. It was between this and Swap, but realistically, yeah, Swap does cool things. It's a great starter. You can do the pitch to special, you can bounce your Monarchs and stuff, but Sub summons your whole deck, so, kind of hard to compare to that. Also, Sub just turns into Swap if you want him to, so, I mean... Sub is just, it's the card that got banned, and there's a pretty good reason for that. It's just, like, way crazy and not okay. So I went with Substitute for my choice. Obviously, just being able to, like, summon Sub and make a dupe lock and thin your deck by 10 cards, and, like, you can get out swaps, you can get out uni. It just does so many crazy, dumb, stupid things for no reason, because they forgot to put a once per turn on this idiot normal summon card that ended up ruining an entire format because of how crazy it is. So I do think Substitute is kind of the obvious choice from the Frog deck. I guess you could even pick Treeborn Frog if you wanted, but I don't know. I just don't think Treeborn's quite on. I understand Treeborn's great, getting the +1 every turn, and it's kind of the reason that deck's a thing. But like, if you think about it, like every Frog is the reason that deck is a thing, except maybe Dupe, which like is just kind of an extra thing that the deck does. Really, the dupe lock thing is only playable because Sub is in the deck, actually. It really wouldn't be that good otherwise, but I'm rambling here. Sub's the craziest Frog, end of story. People are going to say I'm gassing this card, but I don't care because it is absolute indisputable fact that Trooper is one of the best monsters in the entire format. Just think about how many things Trooper does, alright? You summon this thing, you prio mill 3, like, immediately it's just like you have a chance to get value. If you mill anything, you've already just gotten value out of this card. Alright? On top of that, it's a 1900. So it just like beats over everything relevant, trades with like Alias or Thunder King or just any 1900, even the biggest things it trades with, and it trades positively with. You can hit into Hamster Ryko, doesn't matter, you're fine. Like, the card just replaces itself when it leaves the field on top of everything else. The very worst case scenario that can really happen is you eat a D-Prison, and even then if you milled like something even vaguely valuable, you've technically gone plus, and even if you don't, you've gone 1 for 1, which is just like, eh. So, like, Trooper is just so nuts. It's so crazy. You can play it in a ton of different decks. You can play it in mill decks. You can play it in quick draw decks. You can play it in, you play it in Lightsworn. You play it in Value Turbo. You can even tech it in, like, just zombies or Diva Hero. Like, there's so many possible applications for Card Trooper because Card Trooper just, like, facilitates so many different, just, like, any vaguely graveyard-oriented strategy. Like, it beats over any problem card. It trades so positively with everything. The fact that it just, like, on top of everything else, replaces itself when it leaves the field. The fact that it's so good going second, and you just don't have to worry about, like, Hamster Ryko or anything with it either, is just, it's just absolutely crazy. So I think Trooper, pretty severely undervalued card. It's definitely one of my favorite cards. I think the card is just extremely solid, extremely strong, and that's why I have it so high on the list. Number 2, here we have Dark Armed Dragon. This is a card that changed the game forever. when it came out because it was that crazy. Not a lot of cards can really say that. I mean, and it's pretty easy to see why with Dark Armed. I mean, we are still sort of in Edison format, living in like the post Phantom Darkness, like dad adjacent kind of format. I guess you could describe more of like an era than a format. But Dark Armed is just the best boss monster. Like no one can really dispute it. It's the best one. It's like so easy to summon. So easy to summon. It's so huge. It's 28. Like gets over everything. Also, you go +3 when you drop it, but usually you just win the game when you drop it. I mean, yeah, this card just comes down, it ends games. It's crazy broken. Everyone agrees. No one disputes this. Everyone agrees that this card was completely game-changing when it came out. It's like the reason that Phantom Darkness redefined an entire era of Yu-Gi-Oh! So, yeah, Dad, number 2. What could possibly be better than Dark Armed, you might ask? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present you with the answer. That's right, at number 1, we have the boy himself, Caius the Shadow Monarch. Now, this card occupies kind of a bizarre role in Edison format. It's just like a card that gets thrown in like everything, if you think about it. Like Vayu, frogs, zombies, Diva Hero, just about like every deck that can support, quick draw plants, anything whatsoever that can support tribute monsters is playing Caius the Shadow Monarch. It is just the best one, by far. I mean, you just summon this thing, you banish a monster, there's like basically zero punish for it whatsoever. It's one of the best, it is the best form of removal that can possibly exist in the entire format. On top of this, I mean, first of all, it's a 1 tribute with good stats because it's a Monarch. And it's a Dark monster, which is, as I've mentioned before, the best type of monster that you could really be because Dark monsters are just insane. They're the best. Also, they just added a burn effect on this guy that is surprisingly relevant a lot. Like 1k burn damage is nothing to sneeze at. It's usually more than Thestalos, which is like the Fire Monarch, and Fire's whole thing is supposed to be burn, but actually Caius just burns for more. I mean, you just summon this thing, banish like a Dark monster, and hit in. That's 3,400 damage, and you've outed something like completely for free. I believe Caius is, maybe it's not currently, but at many points and in many different events, it is the number 1 most played, not even just most played monster, just like the most played card in decks in Edison format, because it is just like the sort of thing that just like gets thrown in. It's actually, the existence of Caius is sort of gatekeeping a lot of deck building if you think about it, because it's just like, oh, what do I put in this slot? I'll just put Caius in because Caius is too good not to put in this slot. It's kind of like everything just got kind of nerfed on the ban list in March 2010. So a lot of decks just started playing Caius because it was the best thing they could play in those slots. And this has not really changed, 13 years in the future. Caius is still, I think, just the best monster. It's very much reflected in the stats, as I mentioned before. Caius is the most played card. If there's one card that really represents Edison format that should be completely iconic to you, that should be the card you think of when you think of Edison format, it should be Caius the Shadow Monarch, because really it's Caius format if you actually look at the numbers. So that's going to wrap up the list. If you have any suggestions or disagreements or agreements, definitely post those in the comments section below, and I will see you next time. Peace. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Furthermore, if you enjoy my content, you should think about becoming a channel member. You get access to tons of bonus content, and it's a great way to help support the channel.